The silence was the first thing Alex noticed. It wasn't an empty silence, but a rich, textured one, filled with the gentle hum of late August cicadas and the whisper of wind through the old oak in his backyard. For the first time in 5 years, it was a silence not punctuated by the rhythmic sloshing of a filter pump or the hollow echo of chlorine-scented water. The pool was gone. The gaping wound of raw earth, a mix of dark topsoil and lighter clay, was a testament to 3 days of brutal soul-cleansing labor. He'd done it himself, rented the excavator, shattered the fiberglass shell with a sledgehammer until his arms screamed, and hauled away every last shard in a rented dumpster. Each swing of the hammer had been a blow against a ghost, each shovelful of dirt a prayer for peace. He stood on his small wooden deck, a bottle of cold water pressed against his forehead, the condensation tracing a path through the grime on his skin. A strange sense of triumph mingled with the profound ache in his muscles. This yard, this house, had been a shared dream with Sarah. The pool had been for Lily, for her laughter, for her cannonballs that sent arcs of shimmering water onto the hot concrete. For the summer afternoons they'd imagined stretching into an eternity that had lasted 6 years. Lily was gone. And for the 2 years since the accident, a careless driver, a crosswalk, a world irrevocably broken, the pool had sat there, a shimmering blue monument to a future that would never happen. Sarah had left 6 months after the funeral, the house, too full of memories for her to breathe. But Alex had stayed, anchored by the grief, unable to let go, until last week. He'd woken up, looked out the kitchen window at the pool's mocking, placid surface, and felt not sadness, but a cold, sharp rage. It was a tombstone in his yard. It had to go. Now it was just earth, ready for new life. A garden, maybe, something that grew, something that wasn't stagnant. A small, sad smile touched his lips. He had taken the first step. That's when the scream ripped through the evening calm. It wasn't a scream of fear or pain. It was a high, serrated shriek of pure, unadulterated outrage. Alex's head snapped toward the fence line separating his property from his neighbor's. Carol Peterson. Of course. He saw the top of her blonde, meticulously coiffed head bobbing with fury above the 6-foot privacy fence. "Alex! Alex, you get out here right now! What have you done?" Alex sighed, the brief moment of peace evaporating like spilled water on hot pavement. He set his bottle down and walked down the deck stairs onto the soft, tilled earth. He didn't bother going to the fence. He just waited. He knew she wouldn't be satisfied shouting over a barrier. Seconds later, his side gate rattled violently and was thrown open with a crash, slamming against the side of his house. Carol stood there, her face a mask of crimson fury. She was dressed in expensive white yoga pants and a pink top, an outfit utterly at odds with the venom that dripped from every syllable she uttered. "Where is it?" she demanded, her voice trembling with rage. Her eyes weren't on him, but on the massive rectangle of upturned soil. "Where is the pool?" Alex crossed his arms, his exhaustion making him blunt. "I took it down, Carol. It's gone." Her perfectly shaped eyebrows shot up toward her hairline. "You what? You took it down? You can't just take it down. What is wrong with you?" "It's my pool, on my property. I can do whatever I want with it." "Your pool?" she scoffed, taking a step onto his lawn as if she owned it. "That pool was a community asset. My Kevin spends half his summer in there. We had an arrangement." Alex's patience, already worn thin from grief and physical labor, began to fray. "We had no arrangement, Carol. Your son and his friends jumped my fence when I wasn't home. I asked you to stop them 6 times. You ignored me. That's not an arrangement, that's trespassing." "Trespassing?" she shrieked, the word exploding like a firecracker. "My son felt welcome here. He has rights. We all do. We've been living next to you for 7 years. There is an established precedent. You can't just unilaterally decide to destroy a shared resource." The sheer audacity of her words left Alex momentarily speechless. A shared resource? He'd paid for the installation. He'd paid for the chemicals, the maintenance, the electricity. He'd paid the homeowner's insurance that covered the massive liability of an in-ground pool. Carol had contributed nothing but noise complaints when he'd had family over for barbecues. "Get off my property," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Carol's eyes narrowed. "I am not going anywhere. You have deliberately and maliciously destroyed my family's summer recreation. I am entitled to compensation. You are going to put it back. You are going to fill it up, and you are going to apologize to my Kevin for the emotional distress you have caused him." Alex let out a short, harsh laugh of disbelief. "You're insane! Utterly insane! Get out of my yard before I call the police." "Oh, you don't have to," she said, a sly, vicious smile spreading across her face. "I already did." As if on cue, he heard the crunch of tires on the gravel of his driveway and saw the reflection of flashing red and blue lights dance across the windows of his house. A wave of cold dread washed over him, far colder than any pool water. This wasn't just a neighborly dispute anymore. This was something else. Two officers came through the still-open gate. The older one, a man in his late 50s with a weary face and a name tag that read Miller, took in the scene with a practiced, neutral gaze. The younger officer, Davis, was sharper, his eyes flicking from Carol's enraged face to Alex's dirt-streaked frame, to the giant hole in the ground. "What seems to be the problem here?" Officer Miller asked, his voice calm and even. Carol immediately transformed. The shrieking harpy vanished, replaced by a distraught, trembling victim. Tears welled in her eyes as she pointed a shaking finger at Alex. "Officer, thank God you're here. This man has destroyed my property." Miller's eyebrows furrowed slightly. "Ma'am, this is his yard, correct?" "Yes, but the pool. The pool was for all of us," she sobbed, the performance worthy of an award. "We had a verbal agreement for years. He let my son, Kevin, he's only 10, officers, just a baby, use it whenever he wanted. It was the only thing that brought him joy. And today, with no warning, he does this." She gestured dramatically at the excavated earth. Alex felt a surge of adrenaline. "That is a complete lie. There was no agreement. Her son trespassed, constantly." "He's trying to twist it," Carol cried. "He's unstable. Ever since his tragedy, he's been erratic and aggressive." The mention of Lily felt like a physical blow. Alex's vision swam with red. To use his daughter's death as a weapon against him, it was a level of cruelty he hadn't known existed. "You leave my daughter out of this," he snarled, taking a step forward. Officer Davis put a hand up. "Sir, let's all just stay calm." Miller turned his attention to the hole. "So, you removed your swimming pool, sir?" "Yes," Alex said, forcing himself to breathe, to keep his voice steady. "It was my pool. I had it installed, I maintained it, and I decided to have it removed. End of story." "It is not the end of the story," Carol insisted. "He didn't just remove a luxury item, officer. He created a hazard, a death trap. Look at it. It's an open pit. What if my Kevin had come over for his afternoon swim, not knowing this monster had done this? He could have jumped the fence like he always does, fallen in and broken his neck. He could have died." The accusation hung in the thick summer air, stunning in its malicious absurdity. She was weaponizing her own negligence, her refusal to stop her son from trespassing, and turning it into a charge of endangerment against him. Officer Miller walked to the edge of the filled-in area, prodding the soft dirt with the toe of his boot. "It's filled with dirt, ma'am. But it's not compacted. It's unstable. It's an attractive nuisance. He did this deliberately to harm my child." Carol pressed, her voice rising in pitch. "I want to press charges for destruction of property, for creating a public hazard, and for reckless endangerment of a minor." Davis was now taking notes, his pen scratching on his pad. Alex felt like he'd stepped into a nightmare. This couldn't be real. A police officer was writing down the words reckless endangerment because he'd removed his own pool to try and heal from the most profound loss a human can endure. "This is insane," Alex said, his voice shaking with a mixture of rage and despair. "Look at the fence. It's a 6-foot privacy fence with a locked gate. Her son has to illegally climb it to get in here. How am I responsible for what happens to him when he's breaking the law?" "Sir, the law regarding attractive nuisances can be complex," Davis said, not looking up from his notepad. "Especially concerning children." "This is harassment, plain and simple," Alex pleaded, looking at Miller, trying to find a flicker of common sense in the older man's eyes. "She's angry she can't use my stuff for free anymore, so she's making things up." Officer Miller looked from Alex's desperate face to Carol's tear-streaked, triumphant one. He sighed, a long, weary sound that spoke of too many years dealing with the petty cruelties of neighbors. He walked back from the patch of earth and stood between them. "Ma'am, a destruction of property charge isn't going to stick for a fixture on his own property," Miller said, his tone placating. "There's no such thing as a legally binding verbal agreement for pool use in this context." A flicker of relief went through Alex. Sanity was prevailing. Carol's face fell for a second, then hardened. "But the endangerment, the hazard, that is real." The flashing lights were gone, but their ghost images remained, strobing against the back of Alex's eyelids every time he blinked. He stood in the deepening twilight, the citation clutched in his hand, the paper growing soft and damp from his sweat. The two officers had driven away, their departure leaving behind a silence that was no longer peaceful, but predatory. Across the fence, a light in Carol's kitchen flicked on, silhouetting her for a moment. He could almost feel the smug heat of her victory. He was no longer a grieving man in his own backyard. He was a suspect, a perpetrator. The absurdity of it was a physical weight, pressing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. "Get a lawyer. Get a fence." The officer's words echoed in the hollow space where his brief sense of peace had been. Action was the only antidote to the paralysis threatening to take hold. He walked on stiff legs into his garage, the familiar smell of sawdust, and old paint doing nothing to soothe him. He found his heavy-duty work lamp and ran an extension cord out to the yard, flooding the disturbed earth with a harsh, artificial glare. The ground looked like a fresh grave under the light. The irony was a bitter pill. He'd unearthed a memorial to his daughter, only to have it designated a crime scene. His phone felt alien in his hand as he searched for 24/7 construction rental. The man on the other end of the line was gruff and impatient, but for a price, he'd deliver 100 feet of temporary safety fencing within the hour. The price he quoted was obscene. Alex didn't hesitate. "I'll pay it." While he waited, he made the second, more difficult call. A friend from his old engineering firm had a brother, Ben Carter, who was a lawyer. Not a fancy corporate attorney, but a guy who handled, as his friend put it, the messy stuff. Divorces, disputes, DUIs. The kind of lawyer you called when life went sideways. Ben picked up on the third ring, his voice raspy with fatigue. "Carter," Alex explained the situation, his own voice sounding distant and thin. He recounted the pool's removal, Carol's hysterical arrival, the absurd accusations, and the final humiliating piece of paper in his hand. He expected disbelief, maybe even a dry laugh at the sheer pettiness of it all. Instead, there was a long, thoughtful silence on the other end of the line. "She used the words child endangerment?" Ben finally asked, the sleepiness gone from his voice. "Yes, and attractive nuisance. She claimed her kid could have fallen in." even though you filled the hole? Yes. Officer Miller even pointed that out, but the younger cop, Davis, wrote everything down. They gave me a citation for creating a public nuisance. Another pause. Alex could hear the faint sound of pages turning. Okay, Alex, this is what's known as death by 1,000 cuts. Legally, her case is a house of cards built on a swamp, but that doesn't mean it can't crush you. What do you mean? It's my property. There was no agreement. I know, you know that, but you're thinking rationally. She's operating emotionally, and she's weaponizing a system that is terrified of a specific headline. Negligent homeowner's pit kills child. The child endangerment claim is the poison pill here. It moves this from a simple bylaw dispute into something quasi-criminal. It triggers a higher level of scrutiny from every agency involved. A truck rumbled to a stop in front of the house, its headlights cutting across the lawn. The fencing had arrived. So, what do I do? Alex asked, his voice strained. First, you did the right thing by calling me. Don't speak to her, don't speak to the police, don't speak to any official without me present or on the line. Second, the fence. Put it up tonight. Make it look like Fort Knox. Document it. Take pictures, video, with a timestamp. We need to show immediate and responsible remediation. Third, scan and email me that citation and any other paperwork you get. The nuisance. Charge is the opening salvo. We'll likely have to fight that in municipal court. It's the other stuff, the endangerment claim, that's more dangerous. That could bring in people you don't want anywhere near your life. Like who? Code enforcement is a given, but a formal complaint involving a minor could get flagged by family. Services! The words hit Alex like a punch to the gut. Family services? Why? I don't have any children in my home. The words came out before he could stop them, raw and painful. Ben's voice softened with genuine sympathy. I know, Alex. I'm sorry. It's the nature of the bureaucratic beast. A keyword in a report triggers a protocol. It's often nonsensical, but it's the reality. Our job is to prove this is a frivolous, malicious complaint. But until we do, you have to treat it as seriously as a heart attack. The delivery driver, a hulking man with a bored expression, was already unloading panels of ugly orange plastic, mesh fencing and heavy rubber feet. I have to go, Alex said. The fence is here. Good. Get it done. And Alex, try to get some sleep. This is the start of a marathon, not a sprint. Sleep was impossible. For the next 2 hours, under the lonely glare of the work lamp, Alex wrestled with the heavy panels. The fencing was unwieldy, designed for function, not finesse. He pinched. His fingers scraped his knuckles and swore into the darkness. Each panel he locked into place felt like another bar on his own cage. He wasn't securing a hazard, he was walling off a piece of his own life, validating Carol's insane narrative with every foot of orange mesh he erected. He finished just after midnight, his body aching and his spirit scraped raw. He stood back and looked at his work. The once open expanse of his backyard was now bisected by a hideous, glaringly official-looking barrier. It was a scar, just as ugly as the one in the earth it surrounded. The next few days were a blur of anxious waiting. He emailed the paperwork to Ben and tried to create a semblance of normalcy, but a cloud of dread hung over him. He found himself constantly peering through the blinds, watching for any sign of Carol. He saw her once, watering her hydrangeas, casting a long, satisfied look at the orange fence before turning away. The first real blow landed not at his door, but through his phone, a text from his ex-wife, Sarah. It was a screenshot from the Maple Creek Community Facebook group. The post was from Carol Peterson. It was a masterpiece of manipulative fiction. A photo of the orange fence, taken from an angle that made the yard look like a desolate, abandoned construction site, was at the top. The text below was written in the breathless, urgent tone of a concerned citizen. A warning to all parents in our neighborhood, it began. As many of you know, my son Kevin and his friends have always enjoyed the community spirit of Maple Creek, especially cooling off in the pool next door. We had a wonderful, long-standing arrangement with our neighbor. Sadly, in the wake of his personal tragedies, he has become increasingly unstable and erratic. With no warning, he has destroyed the pool and excavated a massive, dangerous pit in his yard. When I confronted him about the extreme danger this poses to our children, he became aggressive and hostile. Thankfully, the police intervened and have cited him. But the danger remains. I am fighting to have this declared a public nuisance and made safe. But until then, please do not let your children near this property. Our children's safety must be our #1 priority. The comments below were a cascade of horror and support for Carol, Martha Gable. Oh my God, Carol, that's terrifying. I saw the hole. It's huge. Thank you for looking out for our kids, David Chen. Unstable is right. Always kept to himself. This is what happens. Hope they throw the book at him. Anonymous neighbor. I heard he threatened her. The police were there for over an hour. Something is seriously wrong with that man. Alex's hands were shaking as he scrolled through the dozens of comments. They were painting him as a monster, a volatile, child-hating menace who deliberately created a death trap. His private, gut-wrenching grief was being publicly twisted into a motive for malicious insanity. He felt stripped bare, his pain and his privacy violated and put on display, for the judgment of strangers. He was being tried and convicted in the court of public opinion by people who used to nod and smile at him over the fence. His phone rang, Sarah's name flashing on the screen. He answered, his throat tight. I saw it, Alex, she said immediately, her voice a mixture of fury and the old familiar sadness they shared. That witch. How dare she? How dare she mention Lily even indirectly? They think I'm a monster. Sarah! They're idiots who read Facebook, she snapped, her anger a shield for them both. You need to fight this. You need to destroy her for this. I'm trying, he said, his voice cracking. I have a lawyer, but she's telling everyone I'm dangerous. Then we'll have to prove she's a liar. There was a fierceness in her voice he hadn't heard in years. I'll help you. I'll find old emails, texts, anything that shows we told her to keep her kid out of the yard. I'll testify. I'll do whatever it takes. She's not going to use our daughter's memory to attack you. Not while I'm breathing. Hanging up, Alex felt. The first flicker of something other than despair. He wasn't entirely alone in this, but the damage was done. The next day, when he had to make a quick trip to the grocery store, the whispers were palpable. He saw Martha Gable in the produce aisle. She saw him, her eyes widened in alarm, and she physically steered her cart away as if he were contagious. He was an outcast, a pariah on his own street. He returned home, the grocery bags feeling like lead weights. He felt trapped, besieged. He walked out onto his back deck and stared at the ugly orange fence. It was a symbol of his surrender, a monument. The nameplate on her badge, Sandra Fields, seemed to burn itself into Alex's retina, Department of Family and Child Services. The words were a cruel joke, a bureaucratic dagger twisting in a wound that would never heal. His mind reeled, trying to connect the dots between the dirt in his yard and an agency that dealt with abused and neglected children. The chasm between the two was so vast, so insane, that for a moment he felt a dizzying sense of unreality, as if he'd slipped into someone else's nightmare. May I come in? She repeated, her voice perfectly even, betraying no impatience. Ben's voice echoed in his head. Don't speak to any official without me. No, Alex said. The word was quiet but firm. He held up a hand. One moment, he retreated into his house, sliding the glass door shut, leaving her standing at the bottom of the deck stairs, his heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He fumbled for his phone, his thumb slipping twice before he could pull up Ben Carter's number. Alex, what's wrong? Ben answered immediately, his tone sharp. She's here, Alex breathed. his back pressed against the cool glass, watching the woman in the blue pantsuit. Family and Child Services. Her name is Sandra Fields. She wants to come in. He heard a sharp intake of breath, followed by a string of muttered curses. Okay? Okay, listen to me. This is the escalation I warned you about. Carol must have used some very specific language in her complaint. Do not, under any circumstances, refuse her entry. That's the worst thing you can do. It goes down as non-cooperation, and they can get a court order in an hour. So, I just let her in? Let her walk through my house? Yes. But you do it on our terms. Tell her your attorney has advised you to record the entire interaction for accuracy. Put your phone on voice memo or video. Prop it up somewhere. Be polite. Be cooperative. But be a robot. Answer only the question she asks. Do not volunteer any information. Do not explain yourself. Do not get emotional. She is not your friend. She is a state investigator looking for data points to put in a report. Do you understand? Yes, Alex said, a cold calm settling over him. The initial shock was hardening into a diamond-hard point of resolve. I'm calling her department head, right now to file a protest against this harassment, but it won't stop this visit. You're on your own for the next hour, Alex. Be a robot. I'll call you the second she leaves. Alex hung up, took a deep breath, and started a voice memo recording, setting the phone screen down on the kitchen counter where it had a clear audio line to the living room. Then he slid the door open. Sandra Fields hadn't moved. She stood with a patience that was more intimidating than any show of force. My apologies, Alex said, his voice level. As per my attorney's instruction, I must inform you that this conversation is being recorded to ensure clarity for both parties. Please come in. If she was surprised, she didn't show it. She simply nodded, ascended the stairs, and entered his kitchen. Her eyes swept the room, the clean counters, the single coffee cup in the drying rack, the grocery bags he hadn't yet unpacked. Her gaze lingered for a fraction of a second on a crayon drawing held to the refrigerator by a butterfly magnet. It was a picture of a smiling stick figure girl with a bright yellow sun, Lily's last masterpiece. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Henderson, she said, taking a small notepad and a pen from her portfolio. My purpose here is to perform a preliminary site assessment based on a formal complaint. The complaint alleges that the current state of your property constitutes a gross physical hazard accessible to minors. The area is enclosed by a 6-foot locked privacy fence on all sides, as well as an internal, secondary construction-grade safety fence, Alex stated, his voice flat, reciting the facts as if from a script. I see the secondary fence, she acknowledged, glancing through the glass door. Nevertheless, the complaint alleges a precedent of juvenile access. Can you confirm that children, specifically the child of your neighbor, have been on your property in the past? My attorney has a complete file on the multiple trespassing complaints I have lodged against the neighbor in question. He was a robot. This was a deposition. Sandra made a note, the tiny scratch of her pen loud in the quiet house. The complaint also expresses concern regarding your own emotional state, Mr. Henderson. It suggests a pattern of erratic behavior since your family tragedy. The clinical, detached way she said family tragedy made his blood run cold. She was dissecting his grief, labeling it as a potential symptom of instability. He could feel his control slipping, the robot's casing beginning to crack. He clenched, his fists at his sides, digging his nails into his palms. I am in full compliance with the law, he said, the words feeling like gravel in his mouth. Of course, she said smoothly. As part of my assessment, I'll need to see the entire property, both the exterior hazard and the interior of the home. It wasn't a request. Alex led her through the house like a tour guide in hell. He pointed out the locked gate, the height of the fence, the sturdy construction of the temporary barrier. She prodded the dirt with her sensible shoe, making notes. She measured nothing. She just observed. Back inside, the violation intensified. She walked through his living room, her eyes cataloging everything. She noted the photo of him, Sarah, and a 5-year-old Lily on the mantelpiece. She walked down the short hallway and paused, looking at the 2 closed doors. "These are bedrooms?" "Yes." "And this one?" She pointed to the door at the end of the hall. "Lily's room. It is a private bedroom. I'll need you to open it, please." Every instinct screamed at him to refuse, to stand in front of the door and physically bar her from entering that sacred space. He had left it exactly as it was the last day she'd been alive. Her stuffed animals arranged on her pillow, her favorite book on the nightstand. It was a sanctuary, the one place her ghost felt close. But he could hear Ben's voice. "Don't refuse." He turned the knob and pushed the door open, bracing himself. The room was flooded with late afternoon light. Sandra Fields stood in the doorway for a full 30 seconds, her gaze sweeping over the pink wallpaper, the small bed, the neatly organized bookshelf. She didn't step inside. She just looked, her face unreadable, and made another note on her pad. Alex felt as if he were suffocating. After she had seen every room, she stood by the front door, her portfolio tucked under her arm. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Henderson. I have all the information I need for my preliminary report. The department will be in contact." And then she was gone. Alex locked the door behind her, leaned his forehead against the cool wood, and took a shuddering breath. He stumbled back to the kitchen and stopped the recording. The silence that rushed in was heavy, tainted. His home was no longer a refuge. It had been breached, cataloged, and added to a file. An hour later, as promised, Ben called. Alex recounted the entire visit, his voice cracking with fury and humiliation. "You did perfectly, Alex. You gave her nothing but facts. Now we wait to see what her report says. In the meantime, I've filed the harassment claim. It won't stop them, but it puts them on notice that we're watching." Alex was about to reply when he saw a figure walking up his driveway. It was an older man, tall and lean, with a military straight posture. Mr. Henderson from 4 houses down, a quiet widower and retired Marine colonel who kept to himself. Alex had never exchanged more than a polite nod with him. "I have to go?" "Ben, my neighbor is here." He met Mr. Henderson at the door. The old man's eyes were clear and direct. "Son," he said, his voice a low rumble, "I saw the car that just left. Government plates. And I've seen that woman Peterson screaming in your yard. I mind my own business, but what she's doing is a disgrace." Alex was stunned. "Thank you, sir. No need for thanks." The colonel cut him off. "Just for information, I have a security system. 4 cameras, high definition, cloud storage. One of them is aimed down the street. It covers the side of your property and that fence line. I reviewed the footage from the last 6 months. He held out a small black USB drive. "There are 17 separate instances of Carol Peterson's boy climbing your fence, often while she's sitting on her porch watching him. There are also 3 instances of him throwing rocks at your windows. And it's all time-stamped. Thought your lawyer might find it useful." Alex stared at the small piece of plastic and metal in his hand. It felt impossibly heavy. It was proof. Hard, undeniable proof that Carol's entire narrative was a self-serving lie. It was the first real weapon he'd been given in this entire fight. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," Mr. Henderson said, giving a curt nod. "Just fight back. Give 'em hell." He turned and walked away, his back ramrod straight. A surge of adrenaline, of pure, unadulterated hope, shot through Alex. He had evidence. He wasn't just defending anymore. He could attack. He immediately called Ben and told him about the drive. Ben's excited profanity was music to his ears. The hope lasted for exactly 2 days. On the 3rd day, a courier delivered a thick envelope to his door. It was from a high-priced law firm downtown. Inside was a formal demand letter on behalf of their client, Carol Peterson. The letter was breathtaking in its arrogance. It accused Alex of malicious destruction of a de facto shared property, intentional infliction of emotional distress upon a minor, and creation of an ongoing public terror. It demanded that Alex, within 30 days, pay the sum of $75,000 for the installation of a new, comparable, or the words psychological evaluation echoed in the silent house, stripping the air of oxygen. It was the most intimate, insidious attack yet. They were no longer just coming for his property or his reputation. They were coming for the sanctity of his own mind. Alex sank into a kitchen chair, the demand letter from Carol's lawyers lying forgotten on the table. A $250,000 lawsuit felt like a paper cut compared to this gaping wound. The state, at the behest of a malicious neighbor, was formally questioning his sanity. His grief, the most private and sacred testament to his love for his daughter, was being rebranded as a pathology, a public menace. A white-hot rage, purer and more focused than any he had ever felt, burned away the fog of despair. The robot was gone. The victim was gone. In their place was a man who had been pushed past the breaking point, a man with nothing left to lose. "What do we do, Ben?" he asked, his voice eerily calm. "We fight," Ben's voice crackled through the phone. "We fight like hell. First, that evaluation. We're not going to refuse it. That's playing into their hands. A judge would see it as a reasonable, non-invasive step to ensure community safety. Refusal looks like you have something to hide. So, we're going to lean into it. But we're going to control the narrative." How? "I'm sending you a list of 3 of the best forensic psychologists in the state. You're going to book an appointment with one of them tomorrow. We get our own evaluation done, by our own expert, before we even get the court order for theirs. We go into their assessment with our own expert analysis already in hand. It's preemptive." Alex looked at the USB drive from Mr. Henderson, still, sitting on the counter. "And what about this? What about her?" "That," Ben said, and Alex could hear a predatory grin in his voice, "is where we stop defending and start attacking. Scan and send me that demand letter. Then upload the entire contents of that USB drive to the secure link I'm about to text you. Her little performance on Facebook and in that complaint is called defamation. Her frivolous legal threats are harassment. Her lies to the police are malicious prosecution. She just handed us a beautiful gift-wrapped countersuit. For the first time in weeks." A grim smile touched Alex's lips. "So we sue her back." "We do more than that," Ben said, his voice dropping. "We're going to file for an emergency temporary restraining order. We'll use the video evidence to prove she has engaged in a pattern of harassment and has knowingly endangered her own child, then lied to authorities to cover it up. We're going to legally bar her from contacting you, from speaking your name, from posting about you online. We're going to shut her down. The hearing will be in a few days. Be ready." The next 72 hours were a whirlwind of focused activity. Alex met with Dr. Lena Hansen, a psychologist from Ben's list. She was a woman in her 60s with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing but held no judgment. For the first time since Sarah had left, Alex spoke at length about Lily. He didn't talk about her death, but about her life. He talked about her infectious laugh, her obsession with strawberry ice cream, the way she hummed when she colored. He explained why the pool had to go, how every time he looked at it he felt like he was drowning. It wasn't a legal defense. It was a confession of a father's broken heart. Dr. Hansen listened, her expression compassionate but professional, taking notes that felt worlds away from the cold observations of Sandra Fields. Meanwhile, Ben worked, with blinding speed. Alex watched from his window as a process server, a grim-faced man in a cheap suit, walked up to Carol's front door. He saw Carol open it, a smug, expectant look on her face, likely assuming it was more paperwork for her case against Alex. The server handed her the thick packet. Alex watched as her smugness curdled into confusion, then disbelief, then a mask of pure, contorted fury as she read the documents. She looked up and her eyes met Alex's across the lawns. The raw hatred in her gaze was terrifying, but for the first time, it was mixed with something else. Fear. The hunter had just realized she was now the prey. The backlash on the community Facebook page was immediate. Carol posted a frantic, hysterical message. "Unbelievable harassment!" the post shrieked. "The unstable man next door is now trying to silence me. He has filed a lawsuit against me, a single mother trying to protect her child. He is using his money and lawyers to bully and intimidate me for speaking out about the danger he has created. This is a classic example of male aggression and intimidation. Do not let him silence our concerns." But this time, the comments were different. A few of the sycophants offered their support, but seeds of doubt had been planted. David Chen. "A lawsuit? What are the grounds?" "This seems more complicated than just a hole in the ground." A new commenter, George from down the street. "I thought this was about safety. A restraining order sounds like it's about harassment. Are we getting the full story, Carol?" The narrative was starting to crack. The day of the restraining order hearing, the small municipal courtroom was stale with the smell of old coffee and anxiety. Alex sat beside Ben, his suit feeling stiff and foreign. Across the aisle, Carol sat, with a slick, expensive-looking lawyer, whispering furiously into his ear. She shot Alex a look of pure loathing. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Mariana Ortiz, looked over the paperwork with a tired expression. "All right, Mr. Carter. You're filing for a TRO against Miss Peterson. Grounds are harassment and stalking. That's a high bar to clear in a neighbor dispute. What have you got?" Carol's lawyer, a man named Sterling, stood up. "Your Honor, this is a laughable and offensive abuse of the legal process. My client is a concerned mother who reported a legitimate safety hazard. Mr. Henderson, in his unstable grief, has retaliated by suing her. He is the aggressor here, attempting to intimidate a witness in an ongoing CPS investigation against him." Judge Ortiz raised an eyebrow, looking at Alex. "There's a CPS investigation?" "Yes, Your Honor," Ben said, standing calmly. "An investigation, instigated entirely by false statements made by Ms. Peterson. Statements we are here to disprove." "Big words, Mr. Carter. Let's see the evidence," the judge said, leaning back. "With pleasure, Your Honor. My client has been accused of creating a hazard that endangers Ms. Peterson's son, who she claims was an invited guest. We have evidence that not only was he not an invited guest, but that he was a serial trespasser, and that his mother, the complainant, was knowingly negligent. I would like to play a short video compilation for the court." Sterling shot to his feet. "Objection! We haven't seen this. We don't know the source." "It's from a neighbor's security camera, Your Honor," Ben said smoothly. "And we would have gladly provided it in discovery, had your client not chosen to escalate this to an emergency hearing." "I'll allow it," the judge said, waving Sterling down. "Let's see the show." Ben nodded to the bailiff, who dimmed the lights. He inserted Mr. Henderson's USB drive into a port connected to a large monitor facing the judge. The first clip appeared, time-stamped from 3 months prior. It showed a clear, high-definition view of Alex's fence line. Kevin Peterson, small and wiry, shimmied up and over the 6-foot fence with practiced ease. On Carol's porch, in the background, her distinctive blonde head could be seen, looking right at him before turning back to her phone. The courtroom was silent. The next clip played. Kevin inside Alex's yard, throwing a tennis ball against the side of the house. Thump, thump, thump. Another clip. Kevin and 2 friends climbing the fence again. Another. Kevin, alone this time, picking up a rock from Alex's garden bed and hurling it against a back window with a loud ping. Ben let a dozen more clips play in rapid succession, a silent, damning montage of trespassing and vandalism. The final clip was the most damning of all. It was from the day Alex removed the pool. It showed Kevin climbing the fence, looking around, and then running back to his own yard. A minute later, Carol stormed out of her house, her face already a mask of fury, and marched toward Alex's gate to begin the confrontation. It proved she hadn't just discovered the empty hole. Her son had acted as a scout. Her outrage was premeditated. When the video ended, the lights came up. A thick, uncomfortable silence filled the room. Carol's face was ashen, her bravado completely gone. Her lawyer, Sterling, looked as if he'd been poleaxed. He was staring at his client, his mouth slightly agape. Judge Ortiz slowly removed her glasses. She cleaned them with a cloth, her movements deliberate and cold. She put them back on and stared directly at Carol. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was quiet and laced with ice. "Miss Peterson," she began, "in my 12 years on this bench, I have rarely seen a piece of evidence that so thoroughly and devastatingly obliterates a complainant's credibility. That video is deeply disturbing. Not only does it show a pattern of willful deception on your part, it suggests a shocking level of parental negligence that borders on endangerment." She looked at Sterling. "Counselor, you had best have a very long talk with your client about the penalties for filing false police reports and perjury." She banged her gavel once, the sound like a gunshot in the silent room. "The temporary restraining order is granted, effective immediately. Ms. Peterson, you are to have no contact with Mr. Henderson. None. You will not come within 100 feet of him or his property. You will not speak of him or to him. You will not post about him online. Is that clear?" Carol could only nod, her face chalk white. "Good." Leaving the courtroom was like surfacing from a deep, crushing depth. The air in the hallway, though still stale, felt clean and light. Alex took a deep breath that seemed to be his first in weeks. Beside him, Ben Carter clapped a firm hand on his shoulder. "That, my friend, is what we in the business call a home run," he said, a weary but triumphant grin spreading across his face. Across the hall, Carol and her lawyer, Sterling, were having a hushed, frantic conversation. Carol's face, stripped of its righteous fury, was a blotchy canvas of panic and disbelief. She shot a venomous glare toward Alex, a final reflexive act of aggression, but it held no heat. It was the impotent rage of a cornered animal. A bailiff, watching them from the courtroom door, took a deliberate step forward, and her eyes darted away. The restraining order was a wall she could no longer breach. She and her lawyer scurried down the hall, their retreat hasty and undignified. "It's not over, is it?" Alex asked, the adrenaline beginning to fade, leaving a profound exhaustion in its wake. "The war isn't, but we just turned the tide decisively," Ben said, packing his briefcase. "Sterling will drop her as a client within the week to avoid sanctions. Her civil suit is dead on arrival. Our countersuit, however, is very much alive. Her homeowner's insurance will likely offer a settlement to cover your legal fees and damages just to make this go away. But the best part? We now have a judge's official opinion on the record that Carol Peterson is a negligent parent and a liar. That changes everything." The change was seismic. News of the judge's ruling ripped through the Maple Creek Community Facebook group with the force of a hurricane. The original post from Carol, still pinned at the top, became a digital monument to her own spectacular downfall. One by one, the comments of support vanished, deleted by their authors in a quiet panic of backtracking. They were replaced by a new, furious chorus. Martha Gable. "I feel like such a fool. She completely lied to us. That poor man, what we put him through." David Chen. "To use your own child's safety as a pawn in a petty dispute is unforgivable. I owe Mr. Henderson an apology." The narrative had not just cracked, it had shattered. The court of public opinion, once so quick to condemn him, now turned its full, fickle fury on Carol. She was no longer a concerned mother, she was a malicious pariah. 2 days later, Alex was washing dishes looking out his kitchen window when the familiar, nondescript sedan pulled up to the curb. But it didn't stop at his house. It pulled into Carol's driveway. Sandra Fields got out, her face set in the same neutral, professional mask. She walked up the pristine pathway, past the perfectly manicured hydrangeas, and rang the doorbell. The door opened a crack, then closed again. Sandra stood on the porch, unmoving, portfolio in hand. After a full minute, the door opened again, and she was let inside. The bureaucratic machine Carol had so gleefully set upon him had turned around and come home. Alex felt no surge of triumph, no satisfying rush of vengeance. He just felt a quiet, hollow sense of cosmic balance being restored. The official blows came in quick succession over the next week. A letter from Sterling's law firm formally withdrew their civil suit. An official notice from the municipal court summarily dismissed the public nuisance citation against him. Ben called to tell him that Carol's insurance company had already reached out, desperate to settle the countersuit before it went any further. The final hurdle was the one he had dreaded most, his own state-mandated psychological evaluation. But the context was now entirely different. He walked into the sterile office of a court-appointed psychiatrist armed with Dr. Hansen's comprehensive and supportive report, a copy of the judge's ruling, and the knowledge that the system was no longer looking at him as a suspect, but as the victim of a targeted harassment campaign. The psychiatrist, a tired man named Dr. Evans, asked the checklist questions, his voice monotone. "Do you often have feelings of aggression?" "I have feelings of profound grief," Alex answered calmly. "But the only aggression I have experienced was directed at me. The report mentions a preserved shrine to your daughter. I have a child's bedroom in my home, doctor. It belongs to my deceased daughter. It is not a shrine. It is a memory that has been cruelly used against me in a legal dispute." The evaluation was short. Dr. Evans, it seemed, was merely ticking a box. At the end, he closed his folder and looked at Alex, a flicker of humanity in his tired eyes. "For what it's worth, Mr. Henderson," he said, "what happened to you was unconscionable. My report will reflect that you are a rational man responding appropriately to extreme stress and grief." And with that, it was over. All of it. The following Saturday, Alex woke up to the sound of a large truck backing up next door. He looked out to see a moving van parked in Carol's driveway. A stark, generic "for sale" sign was staked into her perfect lawn. She couldn't stand the shame. The community she had tried to poison had become toxic to her. That afternoon, Alex rented a truck of his own. He drove to the rental yard and loaded it with the ugly, orange safety fencing, returning the last symbol of his siege. When he returned, his yard was finally completely his again. He stood on the deck looking at the large rectangle of earth. It no longer looked like a grave or a crime scene. It was just a blank canvas, rich with potential. A car pulled into his driveway. Sarah. He'd called her that morning. She got out, holding a small, flat box. "I heard the news," she said, her smile gentle. "Ben told me everything's been dismissed. I'm so happy for you, Alex." "Thank you for being ready to help," he said, "always." She looked past him at the dirt. "So, what's the plan?" "I was thinking, a garden," he said, the word feeling right on his tongue. "Something that grows?" She nodded, her eyes glistening slightly. "Lily would have liked that." She handed him the box. "I brought you a housewarming gift for the new yard." He opened it. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a small sapling, a dogwood tree. "For her?" Sarah said softly. "So we're planting life for her, not just remembering." They didn't talk much as they worked. The silence between them was no longer, filled with the sharp edges of shared grief, but with a soft, quiet understanding. They dug a hole in the center of the patch of earth, the soil dark and cool in their hands. Together, they lowered the sapling into the ground, its small roots reaching down into the reclaimed earth. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn, they stood back, looking at the small, hopeful tree. The war was over. The fight for his sanity, his home, and his daughter's memory had been won. The silence of the cicadas returned, no longer predatory or mocking, but peaceful. It was the rich, textured silence he had craved at the beginning of all this, the sound of a world slowly, finally, beginning to heal. He was standing on scarred ground, but for the first time in a very long time, he felt the unmistakable promise of new growth beneath his feet.